Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. It's October 1st. I can't believe it. And you know what? Every October 1st, I think of my Nana. My Nana was born October 1st, 1915. Can you believe that? 1915. And she passed back in 2016 at 101. So I always think of her on this day. God bless, Nan. Miss you every day. And in greater news, it is the month of surprises when it comes to politics and the run-up to a presidential election. So be on the lookout every day for whatever the October surprise or surprises will be. They always come. We never know what they're going to be. And then any minor news that breaks, we ask, is this the surprise? Is this the surprise? And then boom, you get hit with a Hunter Biden laptop that gets suppressed by all the social media companies and also raised in a presidential debate and suppressed by the moderator. Boom. Today is also, speaking of debates, debate day in America. Just hours from now, the vice presidential candidates will square off for their one and only debate. And this will likely, we think, the final debate of the 2024 election cycle. That's unusual. Normally, the vice presidential debate does not go last. A quick programming note, we will be live tonight right after the debate ends for instant analysis. So be sure to tune in either to SiriusXM Triumph Channel 111 or to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Megyn Kelly, to hear our instantaneous reaction. Tonight's big event comes as the nation grapples with the devastation from Hurricane Helene. And then there's new bombshell reporting on Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, which hits, conveniently, the day of this debate, and his ties to China, both getting more substantial and less substantial on the same day. We'll explain. Joining me now, the guys from RealClearPolitics. You can find them across the dial right here on SiriusXM. They're on the POTUS channel, 124, every night at 6 p.m. Tom Bevan is co-founder and president of RealClearPolitics. Carl Cannon is Washington bureau chief, and Andrew Walworth is chief content officer. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Health has been a big topic around the country over the past few weeks and on this show. And one thing we don't talk about enough is how exercise plays a vital role in that. And it's not just cardio. We really need to look at strength training. More muscle helps to boost metabolism and helps as we age. It helps truly keep us safe. But let's face it, many are intimidated when it comes to lifting weights at a gym, not to mention the fact that we're all busy and don't necessarily have the time. That is where Jacked Up Fitness comes in. They bring the gym to you, a full machine that fits in your house and does it all. It's an all-in-one home gym. It allows you to do multiple strength training exercises, and best of all, it comes with access to their app, which includes multiple workouts where you just push play and then follow along. That takes out all the guesswork. So nice. Jacked Up Fitness is an American company, and they are giving 900 machines this year to the Wounded Warrior Project. That's amazing. So if you're looking to take charge of your health and help vets on their road to recovery, order your home gym today and get jackedup.com at getjackedup.com, okay? And enter the code MK for 10% off your home gym. Getjackedup.com, code MK. Guys, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tom
thanks,
Bevan,
Megyn.
You take off one day. You were gone on Friday. I listened. Phil Wegman was there. Who I love Phil Wegman. He's a great reporter. But I have a bone to pick with you, Andrew, and Phil, my friend Phil. And it relates to this. I dropped my makeup brush when I heard the following exchange on the RCP podcast. It was like the guys had been drinking, Tom. You went away and like they were smoking or I don't know what happened. But listen to what happened while you were gone.
Donald Trump may think he can, trade land for peace. There's no evidence Vladimir Putin even would take a deal like that.
I thought she sounded presidential. She sounded Churchillian. I thought it was just the right tone. And then, for Trump, it's all about Trump. His first instinct is to talk about himself and his impeachment.
And how Zelensky helped him.
A small nota bene here. We heard from so many Democrats that the reason why Joe Biden couldn't step aside was because Kamala Harris was not a good candidate and she was not made of the right leadership stuff. Those Democrats are wrong, it seems now.
Phil's not here, but Phil, that was very wrong what you said. Churchillian, Andrew, Churchillian, Kamala Harris.
Well, you're not the first person to make a comment about that comment I made on Friday. But those of us who are we're on the radio a lot. We say a lot of different things. But I'll defend that to this degree. It was, for her especially, a very clear statement of where she felt the administration should be. It was much clearer than anything Biden has said. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the idea that we're going to sort of easily trade land for peace in Ukraine should be questioned. And I thought it was a strong statement, so I'll stand behind that.
Okay, but you shouldn't. You should take it back. Because it was a momentary insanity from a very sane man on a great podcast. Okay, so Tom, you can never go away again. We can add Phil, but Phil must be shot down when he says stuff like that, because it absolutely was a valid concern about whether she could do it if she was forced to step in and take over the lead role, notwithstanding the fact that she put out one strong statement on Ukraine. She's been a mess. She's been an absolute mess.
Well, listen, I'm going to have to talk to Phil about using the phrase nota bene. I don't know where that came from. Well, listen, I mean, I guess I will have to, make sure that I'm around for every podcast from here on out, just to keep track of these guys and keep them in line,
Yeah. Exactly. That's right. Usually Carl is the one who's like bringing up the Democratic points, which is good. It keeps it interesting. I like that. But I don't know, something happened. Okay. But speaking of how Kamala Harris is in front of a microphone, her running mate has his big chance tonight. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited for this. I can't wait to see how they do. I actually have high expectations for J.D. Vance and for Tim Walz. Though part of me does wonder. I know they put out that statement to CNN that more than a dozen campaign aides interviewed with the CNN saying, oh, he's very nervous and he's not a professional debater. And they say, oh, we swear this isn't lowering expectations. It is lowering expectations. It's an attempt. But part of me does wonder if they're seeing any weakness, any wobbly, answers to the point where they felt they needed to do that. I don't know. What do you guys make of the attempt to run defense and lower expectations mightily to CNN the day before?
Well, Megyn, this guy was in the House of Representatives for years. He's been governor of Minnesota. This idea that he's somehow a neophyte. J.D. Vance is the one who's only been in politics for 2 years. I think it's transparent attempt to lower the bar. I found it laughable. But you introduced a thought that hadn't occurred to me, which is that in this debate prep, maybe Walz has been so off-putting and weird that they are nervous. I hadn't thought of that. I don't really think that's what's going on, but that's an interesting idea.
We're going to know soon. I don't know. What do you think, Andrew? Do you think there's actually a chance he's been kind of bad behind the scenes and they really are trying to make sure we don't expect too much of him? Or you think he's solid and this is just the expectation games so that anything even approaching a B will be received, as you know, by this media as an A+?
Yeah, well, I think, Megyn, that's an interesting question because I think two things could be true. I think they could be nervous about his performance. And the reason they would be nervous is not necessarily because they think he'll be bad, but because he's untested. This has been a really different campaign they've run, where they've sort of run a basement campaign the way Biden did during COVID, except there's no COVID. They have really kept him away from the press, so nobody really knows how he's going to perform in a public setting like this. Everything has been scripted. Everything has been off the teleprompter. And even off the teleprompter, he hasn't said much. So that's the big unknown. And you contrast that with J.D. Vance, who will walk into any microphone and talk for as long as they want him to talk. I mean, he's on all the Sunday shows. He's out and about. And he's projecting, I think, a sort of confidence that might rattle the Democrats a little bit too, because J.D. Vance seems unafraid. And Walz seems like he's not out there. And then the question is, why not? Maybe it's because he's bad, or maybe it's a strategy.
we don't have to go too far to figure out how Walz does in a debate because he was the Minnesota governor twice. I mean, he ran and won for Minnesota governor. And we pulled a couple of debate clips. Here's one against Dr. Scott Jensen, who was the Republican he ran against last time. It was fascinating. I actually went back. This is what my team makes me do. I went back and watched that debate. Debbie Murphy pulled me in. Happy birthday, Canadian Debbie. So I did go back and watch Dr. Scott Jensen and Tim Walz. And I'll tell you, for the first 10 minutes, you can't tell who's the Republican and who's the Democrat. You're like, what? Who is that guy? They're so mild-mannered and they're so, like, they really want to be seen as in the middle and centrist in Minnesota. And it's kind of amusing just to see from that standpoint. And then eventually it was clear that Jensen was the Republican and they split on issues like abortion and they split on issues like how Walz handled the George Floyd riots. That was the only time it got a little spicy. And here's a bit of how that went in SOT 11.
On the sidelines and critiquing, that's not what being governor is. It's making the hard decisions at the time. I'm proud of Minnesota's response. I'm proud of Minnesota's first responders who were out there, from firefighters to police to the National Guard to citizens that were out there.
Anything that has to do with lawful behavior, it seems that Tim Walz isn't there. And he yet says, I'm proud of the way Minnesota responded. Burn that into your psyche, Minnesota.
I said I was proud of the first responders. You may not be, but I was. This was an incredibly difficult and unprecedented incident. I don't care what he says about me. I care what he says about the folks who are out there doing this work.
He means his 19-year-old cooks is what he's referring to.
We have to move on now.
Can I clarify that? And Scott, like so many things, took a clip of where I said, we have a small percentage of the National Guard that is trained for civil defense. Trying to make the claim that this is somehow slanderous of someone who doesn't understand that.
He did just fine, Tom. He actually was pretty strong.
Yeah, look, I think this is transparent, lowering the bar. He is, as Carl said, he was in the House, as you mentioned, two-term governor. He's debated plenty. And I think he's going to do fine. I mean, I'm also looking forward to this debate. I'm not sure how much it's going to matter in the final analysis, but I think it is going to be good television. These guys, I don't think they like each other. It's gotten kind of personal. They're both going to come in with lots of arrows in their quiver. And JD Vance is going to be able to tear him up on all the lies that he's told about his, everything from his record, his military record, to all of these other issues. He's going to hit him certainly on the riots, as well as other things, including abortion, transgender rights, et cetera. And then, Tim Walz is going to be able to turn around and say, JD Vance, you called Donald Trump Hitler and you hated him until you liked him. And now you're, stumping for him. So they're going to have a lot of ammunition to go at each other with. And I expect that they will. And I think it's going to be a very lively debate.
Now, do you guys think, I'll give this one to you, Carl, do you think that each guy will try to make it about the guy across from him on stage, or the two who are not in the room? That JD spends all his time trying to attack Kamala Harris and Tim spends all his time on Trump, or no, it's going to be mano a mano about each other?
Yeah, I think that Tim Walz will attack Trump. I think about half the stuff will be aimed at the nominee, the presidential nominee, and the other half at JD Vance. And remember that comment that apparently got him chosen as the nominee, where he went around calling the Republican ticket weird. That seems to me the latest thing I've heard about Tiananmen Square, and Walz strikes me as a classic case of psychological projection, but I won't dwell on that. But to your question, I think that weird comment that Walz kept repeating until he got on the ticket, he aimed that at Trump and JD Vance, both of them. So that's how he conducts. That's how he debates this, and that's how he frames it. I think that JD Vance will maybe talk about the Biden-Harris administration a lot, but I don't think he'll get as personal with Kamala Harris. Just a hunch.
You mentioned the thing about China. We should get into it. We'll stay on the debate and the tactics. I've got a bunch of good clips that I think you guys are going to like. But the stuff about China it's heating up and also, like I said, receding a little. So it turns out, of the lies that Tim Walz has told, and we've covered the military ones in depth, including with an in-depth interview with 4 of his former service personnel that he served with. He apparently has lied about how many times he's been to China. He said he'd been there 30 times, and it turns out it's not true. He's only been there 15 times, and this was unearthed by, I'm trying to get the media organization that got it, but they figured out, look, that's a lot of times to go to China, 30. So send us the receipts. They asked the campaign, please send us the receipts. And he couldn't. And it's NPR News, which is Minnesota Public Radio. So they said, look, what do you have? And they said, we can only prove that he went there around 15 times. But to its credit, NPR reports that he claimed he'd been there 30 times, that he claimed to have traveled to China dozens of times, and that this is another instance of Tim Walz lying. They also, Carl, say that that he described being in Hong Kong in May 1989 during the student uprising that culminated in Beijing's Tiananmen Square massacre. An assertion that is belied, they report, by newspaper accounts at the time, in which he's quoted as saying as the following: as the events were unfolding, several of us went in, he said at a 2014 hearing commemorating the massacre's 25th anniversary. I still remember the train station in Hong Kong. But they found pictures of him on the day of the massacre showing that he was working locally in Nebraska and saying that he would be leaving the following Sunday en route to China. So he was not there the day of. He cannot possibly remember it as he claims he did during the student rising, saying that several of us went in. He still remembers the train station. He wasn't there. So that's a long-winded explanation of what you just said, Carl. But these little lies over and over and over again really matter.
Well, that's right. And, you know, your memory can play tricks on you. And I think journalists, we all need to be careful of that. You remember Brian Williams?
True.
Megan, you knew him. And I didn't think he was lying. I thought he was misremembering some of the events in Bosnia. So I try to be charitable. But in Walz's case, there's an underlying thing that I find bothersome. And it's that Tom, correct me if I'm wrong on this. He got married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square.
Yes.
And he said that was so he could remember it. And that would be like, you know, I'm going to get married on Joe Stalin's birthday, you know, so I can remember my anniversary or something like that. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm going to marry on April 20th. I'll never forget. Yeah. Or September 1st,
9/11.
Hitler invaded Poland. I mean, if you're going to pick a day, I mean, how about United Nations Day? That's my birthday. That's a nice neutral day. And I want to come back to this. When you do something like that, and then you go around calling other people weird, it seems like you're trying too hard. Maybe thinking of yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, he just keeps getting caught, Andrew, over and over and over again. And it's bizarre. It is bizarre. He's got such an affinity for China. Who gets married on the day of a massacre? I mean, I used to date a guy who was born on April 19th, and he hated it because that's the date a bunch of terrible things have happened. Like, I think Waco happened on April 19th. I think it was Hitler's birthday was April 19th. There's a lot of bad stuff.
20th. Yeah.
Well, my point is most normal people run from negative events. He embraced it. He inflated by two times the number of times he went to China. And at the same time, we now find out, I think this is kind of convenient to be honest, but James Comer of House Oversight has issued a subpoena to DHS, Department of Homeland Security, saying we understand that there's been talk on an internal non-classified Microsoft Teams group chat among DHS employees talking about the possibility of Tim Walz being somehow compromised at the hands of the CCP.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple things. One, it does show the danger of this sort of foreshortened period where they chose this guy as their vice presidential pick. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that might have disqualified him if he had been vetted earlier. Maybe yes, maybe no, but they certainly would have gotten their story more straight on this. But he was picked in a very short amount of time, and picked for a couple reasons. One being that they wanted, I think, a white male from the Midwest, and he sort of fit their idea of sort of what a sort of a masculine guy would look like to pair with Kamala Harris. And he's a hunter and all that sort of stuff. And when he was in the House, he was sort of known as being someone who compromised more with Republicans, won a red district, all that sort of stuff. But this China thing is really amazing, and we've talked about it a lot on our podcast because it is just one of those weird things, to use his own phrase. I mean, to say, no, I've only been to China 15 times, not 30, when I'm a school teacher, I don't know any school teacher who's been to communist China 15 times or talks about communist China the way he talked about it with his students. So that's a real issue, and it does sort of, because Americans don't know that much about him, every time one of these things comes up where it looks like he's sort of fudged the truth, that becomes the narrative about who he is. And that, I think, is the problem that he's having. He's a blank slate. What do we know about him? What we keep hearing about him is every time there's a statement about him, it's about how he has not been quite truthful about something in his past. And so that's a problem. But how much all this matters in the long run when people go out to vote, that's, as Tom was saying, that's the real question. I don't know if vice presidential choices make a big difference or not.
You don't remember President Dukakis?
Well, all right.
It might be different this time for a couple of reasons. One, because J.D. Vance will be, Donald Trump will only serve one term. So J.D. Vance, from the day he gets in, is sort of,
the heir apparent.
The heir apparent. So that makes the J.D. Vance pick maybe a little bit more consequential.
And then there's primacy and recency, right? And that's what you remember. The first thing you see and the last thing you see. And this is going to be, we think, the last thing the voters see when it comes to debates, at least. This is not the way it normally is. Normally there are 3 presidential debates and 1 VP debate, and the VP gets sandwiched in between, the top dogs. But these guys, at least for now, Kellyanne Conway is out there saying, I know Trump said no to another debate, but is it really a no? It might not really be a no. So, and Trump, if he says yes to anything, then every media network will say, yes, we accept. I mean, it's really just a question of whether Kamala will follow through. Right now, she's saying she'll do it on CNN. I think Trump, I know he wants it to be on Fox, or he said he'd do the NBC debate. He should say yes to the CNN debate, because if he's going to do it, because I think last time that went pretty well for him. Anyway, we should assume it's the last debate.
I think you should do it on your show. I think you should do it on your show, Megyn.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think you should do it on our show, but...
Oh, well, good point.
Can I just add one thing?
All right,
You're going to make it sit in with us.
That's right.
Wait a minute, Tom. That was my fault, that thing about Churchillian, Megyn. I've got to fess up, because I started it by saying I thought that Kamala Harris had a nice line when she's talking to Zelensky, and she said, isolation is not insulation. And then these guys tried to outdo me. First... Andy, and then Phil Wegman. I should have never gone there. I apologize. It's my fault.
Yes, I accept. I actually hit the rewind, the rewind 15 seconds. I'm like, there's no way I heard. I didn't just hear what I thought I heard.
I was more measured than they was, if you noticed. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Can
Tom.
I just say something about this real quick? I mean, I don't know if everybody out there may know someone like this. There are people who lie just for the sake of lying. Like, their lies don't even serve a higher purpose. Like, why would you say you went to China 30 times when you 15? I mean, what's the difference? Why would you do that? Why would he say, for example, the fertility thing? I mean, why wouldn't you just say, well, look, we've had experience with fertility, but no, he had to go the extra distance and lie. Why did he lie about being a head coach of a football team when he's just an assistant coach? And the team had success and he was part of it. He didn't need to do that. It's a little bit almost pathological, the way that he kind of lies about everything. And some of these lies don't even serve a larger purpose. And I think this might be one of those instances.
It's a great point.
Can I say Clintonian? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Since I said Churchillian earlier, it's a little Clintonian.
Yes, I accept. I guess so. I have to think it over. It's better. We're heading in the right direction. That I know. No, you're right with the Tim Walz problem. And I was thinking about it. Like, if I were advising Tim Walz on how to get ready for this debate, obviously childless cat ladies is going to come up. So is they're eating the dogs. That's going to come up. And that's JD Vance's home state. And I think JD Vance is going to say, I had actual constituents come and complain about that to me. Fair game. I checked out my constituents' claims. Many panned out. Some were unprovable one way or the other. But, this is an issue. And I think if he's smart, he'll pivot to, let's talk about the dead people. Can we agree there are dead people? There are raped children in Nantucket. Can we talk about that? Does anyone want to spend some time on that? Governor Walz, right? That's where I would go if I were JD. But I was thinking about what else are JD's vulnerabilities. He's got the dogs. He's got the childless cats, the dogs and the cats. He's got the negative comments about Trump, which you mentioned earlier. That'll definitely come back to haunt him. We read in the CNN report yesterday that they were preparing some sort of a line that Kamala was going to use against whomever she would be up against in her vice presidential debate. I mean, presumably J.D. Vance. Remember when we still thought she was going to be the vice presidential running mate? Something to the effect of, what are you going to do to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't hang you out to dry the way he did Mike Pence, endangering his life on January 6th, though it was more cutting than that. I can't remember the phraseology. Okay, that's not a ton. That's not a ton, which is why I think that Tim Walz will spend most of his time on Donald Trump. It's going to be Trump. I don't think it's a fruitful area to spend time going after J.D. Vance and Yale. I just think most Americans get that this was an abused kid with zero advantages who went off to serve in Iraq after he finished high school, came back, earned a double major at Ohio State in 2 years, and got himself with zero connections into Yale Law. Most of us look at that as an American success story. That's very dangerous ground for Tim Walz to dance on. I don't think he's going to raise that on the presidential debates stage. I could be wrong. So I think it's going to be all about Trump. And I think JD, I predict, will do sort of the double, because his whole point is to make the two of them look like the far left loons that the ads have painted them as, that I personally think they are. And each one's got something more radical than the other. Go back to Kamala Harris 2019 and marry that to Tim Walz over the past 4 years as governor, and you have the perfect leftist dream team. So all he needs to do is each answer should just bring up one of those policies. Just pick your top 12. You don't get to speak that often in these debates, and weave as many of them as you can into every single answer. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I think I would add one thing to that, too. I would advise them both to stay away from each other's military career, because I think that's a non-starter with the American people as well. I think that denigrating anyone else's service, even if you find reason to denigrate it, is just, with the limited time you have in a debate, I wouldn't spend 5 minutes on it. And I also agree with you very much on not going after J.D. Vance about Yale. And I think that Walz might do that. And because he sort of, that middle class appeal he's trying to make is that he stayed in the middle class, that he was sort of loyal to it in a weird way by becoming a teacher and not sort of leaving town, and trying to make J.D. Vance seem like the guy who, left town, went to the big city, made a lot of money. It's almost like out of a Hallmark movie or something, and I just don't think that will work, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes there.
Andy, can I
have an obligation to remain in the class in which you were raised? Go ahead, Carl.
Yes, right. Isn't that weird? But I sort of got that feeling from.
It's an odd line of attack. The other thing is they want to attack J.D. Vance for making money in Silicon Valley, and so if they attack him for going to Yale in Silicon Valley, they are attacking all of their mega donors and half their cabinet officials and the Obamas and the Clintons. That is an inadvisable thing. I don't know if Vance will be able to. I don't know if Tim Walz will be able to resist it. The one thing I would think that J.D. Vance will focus in on is, remember that last debate, and Megyn, you had a devastating soliloquy on this where the ABC moderators didn't actively behave as journalists. He can ask he can ask Walz to answer the questions that Kamala Harris wouldn't answer. If you could have done if you did an executive order at the border, why didn't you do it sooner? Why are you trying to, you're trying to make this Trump's fault because he didn't support some bill, but you could have done this for 3.5 years. And I think in that sense, again, I think he'll go after the policies of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I don't think he'll go after Kamala Harris on a personal level, but there's enough there on the policies. Go ahead.
Well, that's an interesting point, Carl, because what if he started raising, how Alex Thompson over at Axios has been doing a good job of asking the Kamala Harris campaign, does she still stand by this position? Does she still stand by that position? And he's pulling them all up that she's on camera or in her own written hand taking in 2019. What if J.D. Vance turned and just kept asking Tim Walz? Kamala Harris is on record as supporting taxpayer-funded sex change operations for prisoners and illegal immigrants. Do you stand by that? Is that going to be a Harris-Walz policy? Whatever she wanted to, she was very loose on the border, and she didn't think that it was a crime to cross into the country illegally. Do you stand by that? What do you say to the between 10 and 20 million illegals who are here now? Should they get to stay? They didn't commit any crime. Bringing up all these issues that she's refused to answer to. And making him, because you want to see Tim Walz squirm, do that. He won't even talk to the media right now. He's so terrified of being out there more than her, getting ahead of her. Remember when, what was it, you guys, where he was too afraid to talk about the people who had just been killed? Was it the Israelis who had been, it was just an attack where he was like, he ran at the Minnesota.
He was at the state fair, and he was asked about the situation in Israel.
Hostages.
Hostages.
Yes. Oh, it was the hostages. Thank you. It was
Four
the
hostages who had been murdered.
Yeah.
Yes. And including an American.
He sort of turned on his heels. Yeah.
And he was too afraid to even say, that is so sad. I'm terribly devastated. My condolences to the families. God bless them. Doesn't take much. He couldn't even do that. So can you imagine trying to say, she took this position. Is that where you stand? She took that position. Is that where you stand? The American people deserve an answer. Oh, that's what he should do.
Well, the other question,
in a few hours,
which I think everyone has been wanting to ask, or I've always wanted to ask, is, Kamala Harris said after that first debate that he was sharp as a tack. I think that was the phrase or something. And
exactly.
Is that true? And that's the question that I think I'm surprised that hasn't come up in any of the interviews so far with her, because that's the obvious question to ask, right?
There is we have a couple of old J.D. Vance clips to look at too. People are familiar with him from his many, many appearances on television over the past couple of months, but it's a little different. A presidential debate is a little different. Not that much different. I think he's going to be good based on what we've been seeing on TV. Anyway, here he was actually doing some hand-to-hand combat with Tim Ryan, who was the Democrat he ran against for his Ohio Senate seat back in October of 2022. They were arguing over the whole, quote, great replacement theory and race. SOT9.
This great replacement theory was the motivator for the shooting in Buffalo. Yes. Where that shooter had all these great replacement theory writings that J.D. Vance agrees with.
No, this is disgusting. I'd like to get here's exactly what happens when the media and people like Tim Ryan accuse me of engaging in the great replacement theory. I'll tell you exactly what happens, Tim. What happens is that my own children, my biracial children, get attacked by scumbags online and in person because you are so desperate for political power that you'll accuse me, the father of 3 beautiful biracial babies, of engaging in racism. We are sick of it. You can believe in a border without being a racist. I know you've been in office for 20 years, Tim, and I know it's a sweet gig, but you're so desperate not to have a real job that you'll slander me and slander my family. It's disgraceful.
Thank you, Mr. Vance.
Hold on, Derek.
Real quick,
I think
we got to get one more question in.
I think I struck a nerve. That was pretty good. What did you guys make of that one?
Well, I liked Tim Ryan. I thought he was my kind of Democrat, working class, defending the workers. And he got off on this, modern Democratic Party identity politics thing. And he waded into it. And I think J.D. Vance set him straight. And I think that kind of thing is going to come up again tonight. And I'm sure Vance will be strong on it. That's just not where Tim Walz ought to go. But I just don't know. If Tim Ryan went there, it makes me think all Democrats will go there. Megyn, it's like they can't resist anymore.
It doesn't work against him. That's the problem, Tom. He is married to a brown American and a non-white American, as J.D. Vance says, and he has mixed race children. It's really tough to sell that he's this secret racist who's going to implement all sorts of racist policies that are going to hurt black and brown people if he and Trump get elected.
Totally. And I don't think that Tim Walz is going to go there. Interestingly, I interviewed Tim Ryan just a few months ago on our podcast. And because he was one of the ones who wrote an op-ed for Newsweek, he was pushing very hard for Kamala Harris to pick Tim Walz. And then he is the only Democrat who's ever debated J.D. Vance, stood on a stage with him and gone toe to toe. I asked him if he was going to be chosen for debate prep. He said he'd love to do it if they asked him. Turns out they went with Pete Buttigieg instead. So that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. But I asked him, what advice he would give Tim Walz when he did end up debating J.D. Vance. And he said to just go after him, be aggressive and hit him on all of his past comments. But again, that didn't work out so well for Tim Ryan when he did it. I think Vance did a pretty good job of parrying some of these attacks that Tim Ryan did. So we'll see whether Vance is up to the task when Walz comes at him tonight.
Here's a little bit more of J.D. Vance back in 2022. Now, this was this must have been a Republican primary debate because it's J.D. Vance up there with his Republican primary competitors to get the Republican nomination to run for Senate. And his opponents were fighting during this debate. And watch how J.D. Vance handled it. It's reportedly one of the reasons that led Trump to endorse J.D.
I remember this.
In that race. Not to pick him as VP, but to endorse him in that race in SOT 6.
Work, sir.
Josh. Squat.
Josh.
2 tours in Iraq. Don't tell me I haven't worked. Don't tell me I haven't worked.
You don't know squat.
It's okay, right?
You don't know squat.
2 tours in Iraq. Don't tell me I haven't worked.
Back off, buddy. You're gonna
you back off.
I just got to comment on what we just saw. Look, as the only other person who's served his country in uniform, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. My mamaw had 6 grandchildren, 3 of them enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. I think the way you use the U.S. Marine Corps, Josh, is disgraceful. It's not a political football for you to toss around. I mean, think about what we just saw. This guy wants to be a U.S. Senator, and he's up here, hold me back. I got 2 tours in the Marine Corps. What a joke.
For the listening audience, the two men were chest to chest. It looked like they were about to throw down. J.D. Vance was seated and then stood up and made that point. That was a very good moment for him. I don't think it's going to come to blows, actual physical blows tonight. Especially we have 2 female moderators, so I just feel like no. But that was a great moment for him. And what it shows is that he saw an opportunity and he knew when to seize it. Right, Tom? Like, that's what I saw there. A savvy, budding politician who thought, this is my chance.
Yeah, I agree. And, we talked about this earlier, but, we haven't really talked about the moderators, and we'll see how they perform tonight. But J.D. Vance has been very good when he's gone on these Sunday shows of really pushing back on some of the questions that he's got. I mean, obviously, every time he's been, whether it's been on CNN or, Beat the Press or wherever, it's been very sort of hostile, aggressive questioning of his policy positions, his past statements, et cetera. And he's done a pretty good job of really pushing back against the questioning and the biases. And so we'll see whether that happens tonight as well. But he's very good on his feet, and he will definitely he'll be able to get some counter punches in when he sees the opportunity for sure.
We're not supposed to have fact checking tonight, Andrew. The CBS News, not at least from the moderators. So thumbs up, that's the right call. Let the candidates fact check each other. But the CBS News is going to have one of those QR codes on its broadcast. So you can click on it to get the CBS News's fact check of what you're hearing. This is such a ridiculous bone to the left that wants the news organizations to play mother to the 2 candidates and, settle the disputes like mom does, rather than just, let it happen the next day. Let the 2 candidates fight it out. We don't need this arbiter with 20 CBS News 22-year-old staffers in the back room. But at least they're not going to be doing it on the set and in the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing. I'm foursquare against fact-checking during a debate. I think that's not the moderator's role, and I hope that CBS, Norah O'Donnell, and her partner stick to that. We'll see. We'll see what happens with the little QR code. I don't know if people really use those things or not. I think most people who are political junkies, if they're like me, they've got their computer open and their phone open and they're looking at the Twitter feeds and seeing what their friends are saying. And, I always want to know what Tom's up to and Phil. And that's what I do when I watch it. So I do my own fact checking. I also, my wife is a recovering TV producer. So we will sit there and critique everything about the lighting and the mics and the background and everything. It's a great way to watch the debate. I highly recommend watching it with a news producer or a recovering news producer. That's the way to watch these things.
Megyn,
I love the way I watch it, which is on a text chain with my entire staff. And just the back and forth is amazing. It's just cutting and cruel. It's wonderful. What were you going to say, Carl?
I want to defend fact checking. I don't think the problem in these last few, you go all the way back to Candy Crowley's brain fart and then the ABC people. The problem isn't fact checkers. It's that they fact checked only one side. So Donald Trump's wild exaggerations could be checked, but Kamala Harris's wild exaggerations were not checked. The other thing is that they got some of their facts wrong. So they're fact checking, but they're repeating misinformation. I think moderators have a right if a person says something that's wrong to say, well, wait a minute, I did some checking. Here's what I thought, and let the person respond. But they have to be right. They can't be dispensing misinformation themselves. It's too confusing and it makes the press look partisan. So that's my little speech.
I agree with that. If you're going to do it, you have to do it on both sides. But with the stakes this high at a presidential debate, I wouldn't fact check. I would be like, he's your problem, not mine. Here is another dynamic. Tim Walz, I know, folksy, blah, blah, blah. I know. And I've been very critical of Tim Walz and his far left policies. But he is able to sell, to some extent, that folksy thing when in front of the right audience. And we saw that the first time he came out with Kamala Harris, right after she chose him. So he's got the ability to charm if he unleashes it properly. You've got two female moderators. So it does somewhat curtail the ability of a male candidate up there to absolutely pummel her, right? Either one is just, the women at home might not like it. It's a risk. It's an unnecessary risk if these moderators are too biased. J.D. Vance has been doing a good job on these CNN interviews, like with Dana Bash, saying, would you like me to answer the question or do you just want to argue your own points because you had me on here? So he knows how to do it respectfully. But here's one of the things I see as a risk. Tim Walz is older. He's got the gray hair. He's a little chunkier, with all due respect. J.D. Vance has slimmed down. He's gotten the nice suits. He's got the perfect facial hair now, the perfect hair, the piercing blue eyes. And he runs the risk of coming across as slick versus this more avuncular, likable guy that you might have a beer with. And Tim Walz, at that debate that we showed you with Scott Jensen, like you could see him being kind of like coming across or trying to as kind of nice. We pulled a clip of it. Here it is.
We can disagree without using profanities. We can disagree with believing our neighbors love this country as much as we do and simply find solutions. I worked with the only divided state legislature in the country, and I am the first governor in Minnesota history to never issue a veto. That's because compromise is a virtue and not a vice. Finding workable solutions to move the state forward is what One Minnesota means. It doesn't mean we all agree. It means we work across differences to live the lives that are best for our family. If that's urban, so be it. If it's suburban, so be it. If it's rural, so be it. But to keep dividing us and say this doesn't belong, that weakens all of us. We can do it.
All right, this was not at a debate, but it's Tim Walz doing his little routine that could prove very effective against a too slick J.D. Vance. Even though J.D. personally has a sense of humor, he is more serious. He's more reserved. And frankly, I know him a bit. He's been through more trauma in his life. And I think he might not be able to be that completely jocular, gee willikers kind of guy.
Well, yeah, I think that, that's the reason, one of the reasons they picked Tim Walz for this job is just for that clip, which you showed, Megyn, which is that he has on one side, and certainly when he was in the House, been a compromiser, been someone who gets along with with other people, and he, I mean, to give him his credit, he seems like a nice guy. The problem he's got right now is that they've gone after the Republican ticket so hard that I don't know if he can walk that back and be the nice guy at this point. He's called Tim, he's called J.D. Vance weird, this cat lady stuff, which they keep repeating. So they've gone and they've sort of, if your position is that the other side is the end of democracy, and that has been the Democratic talking point all along, that this is so consequential because if Trump wins, it's the end of this country as we know it. It's hard to say at the same time, but, we can all get along and we can be nice to each other and compromise. So it'd be a hard needle for him to thread. I think you're right in that if he does it, that's probably more effective. But I don't know if he can do it, given
I really think J.D. Vance, if that happens, if he feels that dynamic emerging, he needs to have a line in his back pocket along the lines of, Governor Walz is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He comes across as an aw shucks Minnesotan, just a regular guy who coaches football. He's the guy who is making it possible for children in all the other 49 states to rush to Minnesota and have their genitals chopped off as minors before they're legally able to drive or get a tattoo, based on Planned Parenthood going into court and saying, that person says they're trans and their parents won't affirm. That's because of him. There's nothing nice about him. There's nothing avuncular or pro-family about him. He needs to have something like that, because that was my reaction to him. That's why Tim Walz scares me, because when you see him out there on the stump with his Price is Right entrance, like, hey, oh, here I am, I'm excited, I love it, I'm super happy. You're like, oh yeah, I'm happy too. He makes me happy. And then you actually start digging into this guy's policy and you think, I'm less happy by the second. I'm actually now scared, and most politicians don't scare me. I don't know. I think J.D. Vance is savvy enough to have that. What do you guys think? Does he go there? Does he go to the trans refuge stuff? Does he go to the radical social policy that Walz has been unleashing in Minnesota? Tom, and
I'll say, okay, you go, Tom.
I think he does. I mean, I think that's because that's what, Trump just released this ad hitting Kamala Harris on the same thing, the transgender sex changes for illegal immigrants and prisoners, et cetera. I do think, look, J.D. Vance has a real opportunity tonight. He has obviously gotten pretty bad press coverage. It's been pretty critical. His unfavorables are much higher than Tim Walz's or anybody else's, for that matter, at this point. But that's all been because it's been filtered through a media that has been very critical of him. He has a chance tonight to stand on that stage and without that filter and really show people who he is. And maybe he'll be able to do that in a way that really helps himself. And we'll see whether, to your point, Tim Walz already has that sort of, coverage from the media, and that's how he's viewed by a lot of folks. And we'll see whether he's able to continue to promote that as well. But I think Vance, because of how critical the press coverage has been, has a real opportunity to change people's opinions about him based on what he does tonight and how he presents himself.
Go ahead, Carl.
Two quick things, Megyn. You raised the possibility that J.D. Vance might be perceived by people just getting to know him as slick. And I think that's something he should be careful with. These candidates aren't really into self-deprecation anymore, but a little of that goes a long way. And it seems to me if he has an opportunity to do that, J.D. Vance, to be self-deprecating in a way that doesn't compromise him or that nobody could seize on, I think he should take that opportunity. But the other thing is that you talked about these policies, Megyn, how some of them are really quite far left and, they don't comport with the middle America values that Tim Walz likes to talk about. But the other thing is the rhetoric, what Andy was talking about. If you keep going around saying the other side, this will be the last election you ever had, Donald Trump's a dictator. If you vote for the Republicans, you're voting to end democracy. That creates an environment where people who are unstable or violent, act out. There have been 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life. I think J.D. Vance ought to ask Walz directly if he thinks that his rhetoric has helped create this environment. Believe me, they do so. If it was the shoe was on the other foot, the Democrats would do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I will say, if J.D. Vance does not mention the name Mamaw, I will fall off of my sofa. That must be done. But humanizing and a great personality who millions of Americans know thanks to his book, Hillbilly Elegy, and the movie. I think we're going to hear Mamaw, we're going to hear Coach, we're going to hear Cat, and we're going to hear Dog. And I'm not sure what else we should put on our drinking bingo card, but give us some thought and I'll come back to you after the break and I'll ask for a word from each of you as the guys from Real Clear Politics stay with me. Hungry Root is one very easy way to eat healthy. They send you fresh, high-quality groceries, simple, delicious recipes, and essential supplements. It's like having someone else do all the planning and shopping so you don't even have to think about it. Hungry Root gets to know your personal health goals, dietary restrictions, favorite foods, how much time you want to spend cooking, and more. And then they build you a personalized cart for the whole week, including easy 4-ingredient recipes to put those groceries to use. I like that, 4 ingredients. Even I can do that. Each order is fully customizable. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat, healthy snacks, and more. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It has to taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Hungry Root is offering the Megyn Kelly Show viewers 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/Megyn to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies too. That's hungryroot.com/Megyn. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Benson.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That was really uncalled for, Senator.
You're the one that was making the comparison, Senator. And I'm one who knew him well. And frankly, I think you're so far apart in the objectives you choose for your country that I did not think the comparison was well taken.
Seems so civilized. Mean, but civilized. Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. My guests are the guys from the Real Clear Politics podcast and SiriusXM show. Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP. Carl Cannon, Washington bureau chief. And Andrew Walworth, chief content officer. So it wasn't a great moment for Dan Quayle, but he won. So it's kind of like, do the big moments matter or don't they? What do you make of that when you look back at sort of these vice presidential debates over history? Is there one you can point to that really changed the trajectory of the race?
Well, Carl was there for that one, so he should talk about.
I actually was. That, right? I covered that one. It's Megyn, you played that clip. It's the most devastating exchange in a vice presidential debate. It had no effect on the election. Right. You could argue it was a bit of a cheap shot. Quayle wasn't really comparing himself to John F. Kennedy. He had been asked three times by the moderators about his experience. Like, you've only been in the Senate 1.5 terms. You're 41 years old. And the point he was making is that John F. Kennedy had about the same amount of government experience. What I think, Lloyd Benson was a good campaigner, but what I thought at the time bothered him about it was Dan Quayle's draft record. He went in the National Guard, and John F. Kennedy was a war hero, and Lloyd Benson was a war hero. He flew 35 combat missions in World War II. Jack Kennedy was not really a friend of his, but they were colleagues and they were former comrades in arms. And I think that was the point he was making. But we've moved way far beyond that now. I mean, George W. Bush went in the Air National Guard to avoid Vietnam. Bill Clinton pulled strings. And so, I don't think people care about that kind of thing. But if you're trying to think that this debate tonight matters in the outcome of this election, you're hard pressed to prove it by previous vice presidential debates.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's much more interesting what's happening at the top of the ticket. Now, Kamala Harris continues her, it's the Presidential Protection Program basically. Light, maybe. It's not quite as bad as Joe Biden in the basement, but it's pretty bad. And I've heard you guys talk about it on your podcast too. She really has done next to no interviews, and the ones she's done have just been so sorely disappointing. They don't really qualify as real interviews. I mean, it's the Oprah thing was an ad. It wasn't an interview, and Oprah's not a journalist, and that was very obvious. So now Kamala sits down with these former NFL players on this podcast. Okay, sorry, NBA, you know me in sports.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Whatever. It's the same thing, basically. Very strong men who play sports with a ball. She sits down with these guys, and she made some news for her typically meandering, long-winded word salad answers. But this one escaped our notice until yesterday. Would you look at this?
Last question. As someone who's broke a ton of barriers throughout your journey, and your journey is continuing to elevate, what does it mean to you to be the first woman president, but the first Black woman as president?
Well, not there yet, knock wood. You should never hear nobody like you has done this before, or it's not your time, or they're not ready. Like, don't hear that. Don't hear that. I eat no for breakfast. That's my saying.
Well, I think too,
I eat no for breakfast.
Oh my God. Okay. See, she's taken the John Wayne routine to the next level. Her John Wayne routine has to do normally with the border. I was a border state prosecutor and I got their illegals out of the... No, she tries to act like she's a John Wayne-like figure in the state of California as AG trying to crack down on illegals. It isn't true. And here she can do, I eat no for breakfast, which reminded me of the actual article, John Wayne. Watch.
Well, here's my word. Get the hell off my spread. Now, get down off them horses. I don't favor looking up to the likes of you. If you say 3, mister, you'll never hear the man count 10. Every time you turn around, expect to see me. There's one time you'll turn around and I'll be there. Understand? Anything goes wrong, anything at all. Your fault, my fault, nobody's fault. It don't matter. I'm gonna blow your head off. You do that again and I'll break every bone in your body. I'm going to use good judgment. I haven't lost my temper in 40 years. But Pilgrim, you caused a lot of trouble this morning. Might have got somebody killed. And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I won't.
That's just like Kamala. It's the same. I know for breakfast. What do you make of her John Wayne routine, Tom?
She would not call anyone pilgrim. That would be politically incorrect.
Right. Agreed.
Them.
Colonizers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, this I saw some other clips from that interview. She talked about her best friend when she was little, and she's doing these things. Yeah, but not really getting, I think, the substance out there. She's not really getting the substance out. And to your point, the past week or so has been this, real push to make her seem like she's really tough on the border. And she's been, trying to push this idea that, she was tough on crime back when she was the Attorney General of California. And her record just simply doesn't support it. I mean, that's where the problem lies. I mean, she is really trying to and part of this is she's trying to run as someone different, a different direction, the challenger, not the incumbent, when it all comes back to, well, what have you been doing for the last few years? And that's a question that she's really struggled to answer. No matter how tough the talk is, it is belied by the record on a lot of these issues, the border being the primary one. And that's a problem she hasn't been able to solve.
Well, here's what jumps out about it to me. The audience has heard me say before, the 7-foot center doesn't tell you how tall he is. If you got to go out there and say, I eat no for breakfast, it's a lie. Actual tough guys or gals don't talk like that. They don't have to. And this, as it turns out, is one of her favorite sayings, which was unbeknownst to me until she used it on these NBA former players. Look at this. Watch.
I eat no for breakfast. Another saying. I eat no for breakfast. I don't hear no until maybe the 10th time. Don't hear no. Don't hear no. I eat no for breakfast. You know what?
Oh my
I
God.
eat no for breakfast.
I eat no for breakfast.
I eat eggs. No, I eat no for breakfast.
Oh, God.
Someone says it can't be done. So I can't hear that.
I have a motto. I eat and drink no for breakfast.
Oh, both of it.
What did you tell
Drink
yourself
it.
to keep
Drink it too.
going, just to bypass all that?
I eat no for breakfast.
I know that's right.
Let me just tell you, I eat no for breakfast. It's a hearty breakfast. Don't hear no. I eat no for breakfast. Don't hear no. Always believe in what can be, unburdened by what has been. Oh!
I was just going to say it's the new Unburdened, but she actually did the combo there.
I would like to give you just another chance to dial back Churchillian Andrew. I rest my case.
He ate Germans for breakfast.
Yeah, okay. Once again, I was talking about that statement that she made, not this one. But, it raises another interesting point, which is just, this strategy of not doing the mainstream press, but being on these podcasts and YouTube shows. Both candidates and both teams are doing it. This podcast she was on, it's called All the Smoke, and it's hosted by two former NBA players. They're both former Warriors. Tom might know better than me, but I'm pretty sure they're both Warriors, and they have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So, not as big as Megyn Kelly for sure, but important place. And, they're trying to reach out to male voters. They have a lot of problem with young men, young African American men in particular. So just in terms of where you're going to show up and who you're going to talk to, I don't think this was a crazy idea. I thought it was pretty good. And I've listened to the same clips. She did talk about that she's for legalizing marijuana, and she's admitted before that she smoked when she was in college, but that was sort of the only sort of news she made on that podcast. But it's not about making news. I think it's about getting her in front of a young demographic, particularly male demographic, and particularly African American. And
okay, but what's interesting about that strategy is
not a bad
when
idea.
You watch Trump doing it. You're right. He's been doing it too. He went on Sean Ryan, Theo Vaughn. He's done a lot of these podcasts that have very high male viewership, I presume. And the difference I would suggest is that more exposure to Trump in that setting will make these young men like him. And I don't think you can assume the same for her. She's very off-putting. I can't imagine that young black men are going to listen to her talk like that and be like, that's my girl. Yes, right. She eats no for breakfast. There's no man who's going to say, she's my champion. Am I crazy? Maybe I've just lost the ability to see how others see her, Tom or Carl. I can't imagine the man.
Well, it's unpersuasive, Megyn. I mean, I'm from California. Who in California politics has ever told her no for any meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner? I mean, the thing she says it so often, you start weighing it. Wait a minute, does that make any sense? She has these same, I don't know. She has these same 3 or 4 vignettes and stock phrases, and the question kind of pops in your mind: has she really led that uneventful a life? There's something missing there, and I can't put my finger on it.
That's a good point. I imagine Willie Brown's wife was feeling no, and that was eaten for breakfast by Kamala Harris. They were estranged. At the time. Go ahead, Tom. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, in a prior life before I started RealClearPolitics, I was in advertising and marketing, and there was the phrase that we used called, you spend to strength, right? And we see this where it's probably, I understand the strategy, right? We have trouble with men, so we're going to go try and convert some men into Harris voters. But to your point, Megyn, that's not necessarily an easy task. Her strength is with women, and it's probably better for her to go on female podcasts and be able to convince one more woman who's on the fence about Trump, make the arguments, and she would be much more believable. She would be much more empathetic and be able to make a connection, as opposed to trying to convert a new voter away from Donald Trump. So maybe it's the right strategy, maybe it's the wrong strategy, but I kind of agree with you. I mean, and we've seen the gender gap this year is as big as it's ever been. In some polls, it's 35, even 40 points. It's massive, and she's obviously doing well with women, but really, really struggling with men. So that's clearly a strategy, and we'll see whether it pays off or not.
Tom, let me stay with you for a second, because she's also struggling with Latino voters in a way we haven't really seen on the Democratic side, I don't know, in a long time, if ever. There was just, the latest was an NBC poll. It was registered Latino voters, showing that the headline was Democrats' advantage with Latino voters continues to shrink. It showed her with a 14 percentage point advantage over Trump with Latino voters overall. Harris at 54, Trump at 40. But historically, in 2012, Dems were plus 44 with Hispanics. In 16, Dems were plus 38. In 20, it was Dems plus 33. So that plus 14 now looks downright puny. And with Latino men, they're tied 47 to 47. Biden had a plus 20 lead over Trump with Latino men. So what's happening there?
Well, I mean, it's a massive shift. And if you go all the way back since 1980, we just did an analysis of this. Since 1980, Democrats have had a 33-point advantage on average in every election since 1980. And as you mentioned, Biden was right there at 33. The biggest was Bill Clinton's reelection in 1996. He won the Hispanic vote. He got 72%. He won it by 51 points over Bob Dole. And then Barack Obama's reelection in 2012, as you mentioned, 44 points. He got 71% of the vote. The highest Republican support that has been gotten in recent memory was George W. Bush. His reelection, he got 40 points. Trump's currently at 42 in an average of the most recent national polls. In that Telemundo poll, he was at 40. In others, he's been higher. So it's a big problem. And as you mentioned, same thing with black voters. It skews, right, gender-based. So, Trump's getting more support among men, Hispanic men and black men. But overall, I mean, a 14-point advantage on Hispanics is not going to get it done, and certainly not in a lot of these swing states. When you think about, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, I mean, that is just not good enough. So they have a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. Yeah, the Democrats do.
Not good enough for the Dems.
Yeah, and I'll tell
you could be missing the secret reason, Andrew. I'll give this one to you. Maria Hinojosa, who had a show on public radio and is an MSNBC contributor, sees a different reason for the trend amongst Latinos toward Trump. SOT 29, watch this.
Why is that? Why is the Democratic share of the Latino vote shrinking?
And what I said to you when we asked the question was, Latinos want to be white. They want to be with the cool kids. They want to be, I'm asking Latinos all the time, and they just say, well, ese Donald Trump es tan buen negociante. He's such a good businessman. It's like, no, he's not. He had bankruptcies. But they don't want to be identified with all of those other immigrants that Donald Trump speaks so badly of, including me as a Mexican immigrant. So they're like, we'd rather, let's be with him. But those numbers, they could cost Kamala Harris the election. Everything that I've been saying that Latinos could push her over the top, these are the numbers that could also take her down.
Andrew, it's because they want to be white. That's the secret reason.
I was going to say, I agree with her on one point, which is that these numbers are bad for Kamala Harris, and it could possibly make the difference, especially in a couple of those swing states. But that is just, that's a horrible way of viewing America, and it's a horrible way, I think, of viewing any groups. And we've done this to ourselves by carving the country up into these sort of demographic categories and expecting them to act as a block. And anyone who really knows the Hispanic voting bloc, and I'm talking about people like Peter Scarry and other people who are really expert on this, know that there is such a wide variety among the people who are who we've categorized as Hispanic. They're very different. Cuban Americans are very different than Mexican Americans. They all have separate, stories. The evangelical Latino immigrants are very different than the Catholic immigrants. So we shouldn't lump them all together. That's my first thing. But if you're going to lump them together, looking at those polls that Tom was talking about, you were talking about, Latinos are not with Kamala Harris on the border. The borders, they trust Trump over Kamala Harris by I think it's double digits now, and their number one issue is the economy, just like most Americans. So they, it's a big voting bloc. 20% of the voters in Nevada and Arizona are categorized as Hispanic or Latino. When you get to 20% of any sample, you start to look like the sample itself. I think so. That is just that's my 2 bits on it. And I think that we really, if I were running things, I wouldn't even talk about the Hispanic vote, because I don't think there is such a thing anymore. How do you like that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, maybe they've become white. Maybe they've achieved their secret goal, according to Maria.
well, that's a witless thing to say, isn't it, Megyn? What she said on that. I mean,
what Maria said, yeah.
Yeah, but the point is that Latino immigrants believe in the American dream, and so if you have a party that's constantly denigrating the country, you're going to be culturally at odds with them. Mike Madrid, who knows a lot more about it than most people, he was in Republican politics in California for 3 decades, wrote a book. I think it came out in June. And he said that Latinos of this cycle are the Reagan Democrats of 1984. And for the same reason, because they believe that the Republican Party now speaks for working class people. And so, the Roosevelt, if that's true, the Franklin Roosevelt coalition is now officially dead. The Republicans have emerged, at least in the minds of working class people, as the party of the working class. And that encompasses most Latinos.
It's remarkable.
The last thing to say about it real quick, Megyn, is just that it's the fastest growing portion of the electorate in the United States. It was 10% in 2012. It was 13% in 2016. And now projected to be this year, 14.7% of all eligible voters will be Hispanics. And that's, that is now the largest group, minority group in the United States.
I think you mean Latinx, but I'll forgive it on the fly.
Is that how you say
Carl,
that, Megyn? I've always wondered how you say that.
I thought it was
Latinx. It depends on who you ask. We actually did a deep dive on this, trying to figure it out. Is it Latinx or is it Latinx? And there's a division amongst the experts.
Of course.
Carl, you mentioned earlier, like 20 minutes ago, about something about the rhetoric around Trump. And, how if he's Hitler, that's how you have to behave. You have to see that all the way through. And it's been 15 days since the second assassination attempt on his life. It's completely forgotten. Absolutely no one is mentioning anything about it. Other than you guys, I haven't seen Secret Service stories. God bless Susan Crabtree. He's doing such a great job for you guys. I go to her all the time. I mean, she was just on your show the other day. She's amazing. But as you know, she stands alone for a number of reasons. And just this morning, there was a Princeton professor by the name of Eddie Glaudet who was on MSNBC. He started crying over Trump's dog's rhetoric. And listen to how he described Donald Trump 2 weeks after the man had a second attempt on his life. Watch.
He's dangerous. He's dangerous to particular people. And the history of the country is such that we can't play fast and loose with it. Fast and loose with it.
Isn't it incumbent on all of us to protect the people who are endangered by him?
But you never have. That's the rub. You never have. Because we got to keep this troglodyte out of office. Because if he comes in, our babies are going to be in danger. Because remember, those young children are going to grow up with the memory of having to not go to school for the threat of bombs. And somebody told them that their moms and dads eat cats, they eat cats and dogs. I'll get myself together, Claire.
Okay, take a minute. Deep breath.
Well, what about that?
I understand what you're saying.
He's dangerous, Carl. Downright dangerous. Yeah. He's the dangerous one.
Yeah. So this is the point I was making. I'll expound a little bit. When Bill Clinton was president, and the country's discourse seemed to go off the rails for a while, there would be an event. Rush Limbaugh would say something terrible about Bill Clinton's daughter, or, and then later when Gabby Giffords was shot, and the media and the Democratic Party were very quick to look at Republicans and conservatives and to ask them, to pose the question, do you feel at all responsible for this rhetoric? Yes, it's an unhinged person who did this thing, but you create an environment where unhinged people are going to listen to you. And so you said that Bill Clinton is a socialist, or whatever you said, that he doesn't want, he'll kill babies. Well, those principles were right. It's incumbent on people when they're talking to be at least in an area where they're not demonizing the other side. And then the Democratic Party and much of the media has done this now for 8 or 9 years with Donald Trump. And we talked about this in our podcast, as you know, Megyn. I mean, two women tried to kill Jerry Ford in a 17-day period. So, and he was the most benign person we've ever had in that office, right, the least offensive. So you can't totally go by what the nuts do. But you'd think these people would use their own standards that they applied to Republicans on violent rhetoric and at least think about what they're saying. And I just don't see any evidence that they're doing that. And you see when they go on MSNBC, the anchors not only don't try to rein them back, they encourage them and try to push them to say even more incendiary things. It's a problem. It's a problem no matter who wins this election. How are you going to govern a country of 330 million people when half of the people who vote think the winner is a monster and the winner wants to, and the loser or the winning side thinks, thank God those people would have killed us. They would have killed our babies. It's not helpful. And I blame the media for a lot of this. That's not our historic role is to bring people back from the brink and to remind them of what unites us. And you just don't, you see less of that and far too little of it than is needed. There's my speech.
What happened there, now I like your speech. And what happened there, Andrew, was instead of the anchor, Nicole Wallace, even trying to fact check that Trump's rhetoric led to bomb threats, which is not proven at all. We know that Trump said what he said during the debate. We know that there have been some testimonials out of Springfield to that effect, and had been at the time. And then we know that there were bomb threats that came from some foreign country that was described by the governor as a hoax. It was a hoax, not upset Republicans about the dogs being eaten, that this was in no way the fault of Donald Trump, at least not according to any evidence we've seen, but she allowed that guy to pin it on Trump as evidence that he is dangerous. I mean, it's just completely reckless, the way the media behaves, the way MSNBC has been behaving. And that panelist, Princeton, remember when we used to want to go to Princeton? We looked at places like Princeton and Brown and Harvard as like the great places for us to wind up, or now our kids to wind up. Those days are gone. Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, you should have called on Tom. He went to Princeton.
Yeah, Tom. I blame you is really what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I think that they see this causality as only being in one direction too, which is the other problem. The idea that, as you say, it's been disproven that Trump's rhetoric had anything to do with those bomb threats. But if that were true, why wouldn't it be equally true that the Democratic rhetoric would be driving people to make these assassination attempts and threats against Donald Trump? I mean, you can't have it one way and not the other, So I think that's exactly right. The problem. And yeah, I mean, I think, Carl's very eloquent on this, and that's why we have him on the radio, and he's so good, is that our job in the media is to try to bring the rhetoric down a little bit and have, good disagreement and policy differences and argue and have fun doing it. At least we try to. But, at the end of the day, there is a lot more that unites us than divides us as a country. And we should be reminded of that from time to time by our media, even though I don't think that's the media's primary job. The media's primary job is to mine these differences and to show their listeners, their readers, their viewers, try to get politicians to go on the record and say what they're going to do if they had power, We give these politicians so much power in this country right now. We do have a responsibility to hold their feet to the fire and find out what they're going to do. And I think we've failed largely in that regard, at least with this current ticket on the Democratic side.
I'll tell you this, Tom Bevan. I went to Syracuse, did not go to Princeton, and my roommate in my dorm, and then for a couple of years thereafter, was from the town of Princeton and had gone to Princeton Day School growing up. And so I would go back to Princeton with her from time to time, and we'd go to the reunions, which were very big at Princeton, and such a collection of smart people like you. And I remember thinking, God, what a wonderful place. It seems just has such a character. Everyone seems to really be very proud of the fact that they're from Princeton, blah, blah, blah. Imagine yourself back when you went, I feel like we're around the same age, walking into a class at Princeton, sitting down with this guy and getting the tears crying about how dangerous the Republican presidential candidate is, then getting the finger pointed at you. You haven't stopped it. You, white person, which is a clear implication in Nicole Wallace, you haven't stopped it by this man who's blubbering about non-facts, about made-up facts. We don't know why some unknown foreign actor called in bomb threats. It could have been to try to make Trump look bad. It could have been in response to the Springfield City Council meeting at which all of these claims were made on camera. We have no idea. But imagine the amount of disinformation and emotionality being thrust at you at Princeton University, where this guy teaches.
Right, along with Paul Krugman and some other left-leaning individuals. Yeah, look, obviously, Princeton's campus is way different today than it was when I was there, 35 years ago. So as are most college campuses around the country. But the other thing that bothers me about this is a lot of this rhetoric is that, Trump's already been in office. I remember in 2015, one of my kids came home from school distraught. He was in the second grade. And because his teacher had told him that if Donald Trump was elected, that his friend who originally was from China was going to be sent out of the country. I mean, these were the sort of fear that was being peddled, right? If Donald Trump gets elected, this will happen. All these terrible things will happen. Well, Donald Trump got elected. You may like him, you may not like him, you may hate him. The country didn't end. We didn't have all these terrible things, happening. And so here we are now, again, he's already been president. What is Eddie Glaude? What does he think? He thinks that, he's trying to peddle this fear that all these things are going to happen and to all these terrible things to all these Americans. And I simply think that most Americans don't think that because we've already lived through a Trump presidency. Again, whether you liked it or didn't like it, the world did not come to an end. And so a lot of this stuff, this fear mongering, falls flat to a lot of people.
I will say to the professor what no woman wants any man to say to her: calm down. Just calm down. As Hemmer used to say when we co-hosted America's Newsroom, sim the myrrh. Okay, just sim the myrrh. We're going to be just fine. Okay, you guys, what a pleasure as always. Love seeing you all. And Andrew, I accept your apology and I forgive you.
I'll keep him in line, Megyn. Don't worry.
Good man. Good to see you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, Joe Pags is here. Looking forward to talking to Joe Pags. Lots to go over. Don't go away. Let me tell you something. This morning, I walked downstairs and Strudwick, who did not sleep in his crate, had completely soiled virtually every carpet in my home. Almost every one. And you read about it at MegynKelly.com. The point is, notwithstanding that behavior, I love him. And I'm going to keep him. And I love Thunder too. Thunder just sits there looking at him like, I told him not to. I told him they don't like it when we do that. She's just as sweet and good as they come. But Strudwick, as naughty as he is, I love him. He's totally a lovable guy. And I really can't imagine life without them, though my carpets would be in better shape. My dogs have a great life. Some dogs aren't so lucky. And this is why I want to tell you about Delta Rescue. God bless Delta Rescue. It is the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. These guys have rescued thousands of dogs who have no one to love them or take care of them, also cats and horses. They provide all these animals with shelter, safety, and love. And they've been doing it now for more than 45 years. So this is the real deal. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open, and giving can bring tax benefits to you, too. Speak with your estate planner about how you can grow your estate while helping animals in need. And check out their estate planning tab on their website if you want to learn more. We do love Thunder and Strudwick, and we really want other dogs who need love to find it too. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you forget to file for an extension? The October 15th deadline is fast approaching and time is running out. If you have not gathered all of your documents or made any estimated payments, you could soon be targeted by the IRS. After October 15th, the IRS can garnish your wages, freeze your bank accounts, or even seize your property. That's the bad news. The good news is there's help available. Tax Network USA, a nationwide tax firm, has helped taxpayers save more than $1 billion in tax debt. They have filed over 10,000 tax returns and assisted thousands in reducing their tax burdens. And they can help you too. Don't wait. Visit tnusa.com/Megyn or call 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. They will guide you through a few simple questions to determine how much you can save. Take action now before it's too late. Visit tnusa.com/Megyn or call 1-800-958-1000. Here to join us with more in advance of tonight's big vice presidential debate, my friend Joe Pags, host of the Joe Pags Show, which you can find at joepags.com. All right, Joe, great to see you again. So what are you looking for in watching tonight's big debate?
Megyn, thanks for having me back on. I'm sorry I'm a little sluggish today. I was busy eating a lot of no for breakfast.
Drinking it too, right?
I'm looking forward to you minding your own damn business. That's what I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to how Walz is going to sort of frame himself as Minnesota Tim. You're just a regular guy, and J.D. Vance is the elitist from Harvard, or from Yale, I should say. When in reality, we know the story of J.D. Vance. He's the Appalachia kid who, we know his entire full story. Walz, we have no idea why he was in China. We know that he lied about his military service, but he's going to try to frame himself as the regular guy that gets the regular American. And J.D. Vance is way above everybody, this hotty-toddy lawyer guy. I don't think it's going to work. I think that people know who J.D. Vance is, and I think that they don't know who Tim Walz is. This is literally his opportunity to say, this is who I am. And he's got to keep the act up. It's not easy when you keep lying. And he's been lying about who he is for a long time. Megyn, do you know when he went to China and how long he was there? Was he in the National Guard when he was in China? What was he learning in China? Was he teaching Chinese economy really to Minnesota school students? We don't know anything about this guy, but he's going to pretend like he's just a regular guy.
Yeah, I know a lot of trips to China. I think the James Comer thing, saying I have a whistleblower from inside DHS saying there's internal correspondence amongst DHS employees on a group chat expressing concerns about him potentially being compromised by the CCP. That smells to me like a favor to Team Trump Vance to leak such a thing on the day of the vice presidential debate.
I agree.
But separate and apart from that, it's a fair question. I mean, who else has gone to China? Now it's 15, used to be 30. Now it's 15. 15 times who says he's never been treated so well in all of his life, who praises it as a wonderful place where they just share, where the doctor makes the same as the construction worker. It absolutely embracing, the communist approach to like that all sounds very weird. And Comer's letter does raise a good point, which is the State Department has been actually concerned about China trying to turn or reach out to our gubernatorial leaders for quite some time now. So it's not all smoke and mirrors.
Well, it's not. And his former students all say he was very, very high on China. Listen, I've gone to China. I adopted my daughter Gia from China. I'm not against the Chinese people, but the system is scary. When you're there, you know you're not in America. When you're there, you know that you're under authoritarian rule. You realize that. You feel that around you. This guy embraced it, loved it, and taught it in class. Megyn, think about it this way. What if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were both supported by and endorsed by Putin and by Iran, and the vice presidential nominee spent a bunch of time, 15 times in China? How do you think the press would react to that?
That's a good question.
It's kind of simple, right?
So Team Trump Vance is getting smarter now and more targeted in its advertising, which is good because we have 5 weeks to go. I mean, it's down to it now, 5 weeks left. And thankfully, one of the things they did was run an ad on her weird trans prisoner stance in her own hand, filled out in her ACLU questionnaire in 2019. During NFL, I don't watch the NFL, during NFL Sunday Night Football. I know it happened there because I heard Charlamagne say it, but here's the ad that they ran.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
And here's Charlamagne the God reacting. Watch this.
I'll tell you what, that ad they was running during the football games this weekend claiming the vice president supports funding gender transition surgeries for all prison inmates and migrants in the U.S., that was nuts. I don't know if it was...
I wouldn't say nuts, but that was crazy.
That was funny.
I don't know if it was the backdrop of football, but when you hear the narrator say Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners, that one line, I was like, hell no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that.
I definitely see that. She did
that ad was effective. It literally said that Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners. And it talks about how, she supports funding gender transition surgeries for all prison inmates and migrants in the United States. That ad was impactful. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, damn.
Was it because it was during football?
Yes. I think it was because it was during football. I don't think I would have paid that commercial no attention if it was any other time.
What do you make of it, Joe?
I think he's absolutely right. Yeah, it's funny that he said that the ad claimed that she wants this. He's still sort of couching it a little bit. Remember, this is the same guy, Charlamagne. I don't know the guy. He seems like a very good broadcaster. But Joe Biden said, if you don't know to vote for me or vote for Trump, you ain't black. And Charlamagne just took it. So he's still kind of couching it, but he's right. As a manly man, like I am, clearly, if I were watching football and that popped up, or watching boxing and that popped up, or watching something that's filled with testosterone and virility, I probably would go, holy crap, really? That's what she wants? And the fact is, that's what she wants. That's what she's always wanted. And Megyn, it's never made any sense to me why that side thinks catering to less than 1% of all population about this trans stuff. It never made any sense why they keep on doing that. Why did she sign that thing? Why did she run on that? Why did she say that in the debate? I don't get why they do it. I think they think they'll get the broad LGBTQ XYZ 1, 2, 3 people to then vote for them. I don't think so. I don't think anybody is okay with spending our money to give somebody some vanity surgery to make them feel better because they came here illegally or because they're locked up. It doesn't make sense to me, to be honest.
So we're going to fund the sex change operations of serial killers. Makes a lot of sense. That's exactly where we want our taxpayer dollars going. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is saying that we need to dig deep into our pockets to help the victims of Hurricane Helene. So we just gave another, $2.6 billion to Ukraine. And he's turning around to American citizens saying, I need more of your money because we don't have it in our federal coffers to help the people who are suffering in the wake of. But we do have it, according to Kamala Harris, to pay for the sex change operations of serial killers and people in this country illegally. Help it, make it make sense.
Well, I can't because I'm rational and reasonable and I'm logical like you. As we're watching this unfold, we see the guy walking around in his fatigues the other day, this little dictator guy. You might not feel that way. I do about Zelensky. $260 billion that we've sent over there. According to some reports, Andy Biggs says it's even more out of Arizona. So we sent that kind of money there, but we can't get Starlink up unless Trump talks to Elon Musk to help people that are in the storm-ravaged areas. Biden couldn't leave Delaware to go to the White House and pretend he was working. Kamala Harris couldn't come off the campaign trail and say, hey, we're thinking about you. I'm back at the White House. What can we do for you? And then to ask the American people to support the American people. As Megyn, how many billions of dollars have we given illegal aliens that have come across the border in phones and food and room and board and housing and everything else? It just doesn't make any sense. I think the regular American, even if they lean left, even if they're far left, is going, wait a second. Shouldn't we take care of our neighbor first? This is them saying who they are. They weren't smart enough to get off the campaign trail. He wasn't smart enough to get off the beach for a day and go back to Washington, D.C. That's not that far from Delaware, to say, I'm at least here for you. They're completely detached. And what I love is that they're showing it to us. You can't even deny it anymore. They're completely disconnected from the regular American. They just want to be monarchs.
I mean, it does seem interesting that this hurricane is like they ignored it. The people in power ignored it for the first 3 days. Exactly. And then only yesterday did Kamala Harris put out that very fake looking photo of her on Air Force Two with what may or may not have been a blank sheet of paper in front of her. I mean, it is possible they somehow whited out what was in front of her.
Her earbuds weren't plugged in, Megyn. The earphones were not plugged in. They don't work if you don't plug them in. I mean, come on.
Exactly. So, and she's like, oh, I've been hard at work. And Joe Biden was asked, all I can think of is Joe Biden now in the wake of Maya Rudolph's Saturday Night Live. Joe Biden. What Joe Biden said was that he spent 2 hours on the phone from Delaware. Oh, 2 hours? Really? Okay. I mean, Trump was actually down there immediately and coordinating with Elon and coordinating with the Graham operation to get relief supplies in there. And he's not even the president, Joe.
Right. The righteous indignation of Joe Biden when he was walking out with that gigantic door that I don't think he could even open anymore by himself. He stopped and turned when the reporter said, why weren't you in command? Were you commanding this relief effort? He said, it's called a telephone. I was in command on the phone 2 hours each day. Oh, wait a second. Look, at the end of the day, you've got people who just don't care unless they think they can gain votes. Now, we can talk about that region. Asheville is a very, very liberal city. Some call it the East Coast version of San Francisco. So they're not going to gain any votes there. They already own Asheville. The surrounding areas are all red, just like East Palestine, some would say, when there was a train derailment and Joe Biden didn't go for 2 years. So at the end of the day, they only care about votes. They care about keeping their power. They care about sitting on the throne and not being kicked off. But Americans are not stupid. And again, doesn't matter if you're left or right, and if Megyn Kelly and Joe Pags agree with the people watching and listening or not. What we do agree on is my neighbors are in need and you're taking care of trans surgeries. My neighbors are in need and you're at the beach. My neighbors are in need and you're telling me how you eat no for breakfast on all the smoke. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. It's not logical, Megyn. And you and I are so logical, it makes our faces hurt. Look at my face. My face hurts because of all this.
Mm-hmm. The I eat no for breakfast thing is a lot to digest. It really is. I mean, so to speak, pardon the pun, a lot. I do think it's like, look, we got Georgia that's affected. We've got North Carolina that's affected. Some Virginia that's affected. And there is outrage. If you spend 2 minutes on X today, you will see report after report of our fellow Americans who really are hurting. And by the way, Americans will give. They will give out of pocket. They always do. We're the most generous people in the world. It's just the gall of the president to look at us and say, you need to pay for it, as he dumps billions. Just another tranche went out to Ukraine. That we're also paying for that in any event. Okay. But I think that this is going to gin up some sentiment that is not going to be particularly helpful to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And even though they're just pretending, she is just pretending to do stuff about it right now. I actually think like this is going to play in a way that I haven't totally figured out, the full implications of it over the next 5 weeks.
Well, I think that it's going to play out very, very severely because the people are not going to be back to normal in 5 weeks. The people are still going to be suffering. And by the way, I don't hear Ukraine saying, what can we do for you? I know you guys had a big problem. I don't hear our allies in NATO saying, hey, how can we send some money, send some aid, send some help? Because the president and vice president aren't taking it seriously or just don't care. So why would they ever step up? They still have their hands out over there. I think in the next 5 weeks, there's no way you fix this. You can go to FEMA every day if you're Kamala Harris, and you can pretend like you care and pretend like you're in command and pretend like you talk to Brian Kemp. He's a Republican, so still vote for me. The fact is, Ron DeSantis has done more than our leadership in central government in Washington has done for the people that are most in need. Donald Trump and Elon Musk have done way more than these other people have. And Megyn, I would be fine with, and I'm a guy who's going to vote for Trump. I can't wait to vote for Trump again. But I would be fine with Trump, Vance, Walz, Harris, Biden, everybody going there together to FEMA saying, man, forget politics. We got to help these people. But they're not smart enough to do that. I know Trump. You know Trump. He would definitely say, yeah, I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with Kamala Harris. I don't care. Doesn't matter what the implications are for the election. I want to help people who are in need. But that's not happening because these people can't get away from the idea of losing their power to somebody who doesn't believe in gigantic central government. That's what this is all about for them. It's sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, you'd think that they would be thrilled to have an opportunity to help.
Of course.
At a minimum, from a cynical standpoint, people in a couple of swing states. But the reaction has been absolutely slow going. And the fact that she stayed in L.A. at that fundraiser with Demi Lovato eating her beef Wellington while people were dying. I mean, the video of that grandfather and grandmother on the roof with their grandchild, a 6-year-old grandchild who reportedly died. is awful. And she's putting out, having reporters put out how she's partying with these celebrities and having her beef Wellington. It's truly a let them eat cake moment. She's the sitting vice president. Get home. The president couldn't leave Delaware to go back to Washington. I don't know. You're not hearing a ton about it in the press because they want to run cover for these two. But so far, for 72 hours, we're completely bungled.
Well, when did she sit down with those two basketball players, Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson? When did that happen? Did that happen Saturday while the people were drowning? Did it happen Sunday? When did that happen as she talked about getting a pork roast ready? And by the way, was she making pancakes that morning and then, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Or was she making a pot roast? She changed what she was doing the morning Joe Biden called her. But at the end of the day, hey, Matt, hey, Steven, I can do that maybe next week. We got people drowning in North Carolina. I'm going to go there instead.
I don't know. Steve Cracker says he thinks it was Thursday, so that would have been before the storm. But we certainly knew the storm was coming. And by the way, of course, the podcast was a joke anyway because she's trying to go to a friendly audience. She's intentionally going to places that won't ask her tough questions. It's, I don't know if she'll ever do another interview again. Frankly, I don't know whether we'll ever see her after tonight. Maybe she'll just let Tim Walz take the baton and run with it. All right, last word, Joe Pags, your prediction for how tonight will go.
I think, as I said earlier, I think that Walz is going to walk out and say, hey, first he's going to say this. We shouldn't ever talk about anybody else's military service. We all served honorably. He's going to try to get that off the table immediately because he's been lying about it for years. I think that he's going to try to look like Minnesota Tim. He's not. I think that J.D. Vance is smart enough to expose him for enjoying the riots in Minneapolis, for waiting 3 days to get the National Guard in there, to talk about his stolen valor stuff. I think all that's going to happen. When you look at Minnesota and how in ruins it is, that is all on Tim Walz, and J.D. Vance just has to highlight that. I think he's going to be fine. It's going to be interesting. I can't wait to watch.
The stolen valor. He should bring up the stolen valor. Joe Pags, great to see you. Don't forget, we'll be back tonight with Rich Lowry, Mark Halpern, Eric Bolling, Eliana Johnson, and more live. Don't forget, tonight, right after the debate, 10:30, we will be live on youtube.com/Megyn Kelly and on SiriusXM Triumph Channel 111 with our instantaneous reaction to what we all saw together. If the past debates prove any model, there'll be plenty to discuss. See you then.